was I actually used to be the person in charge of the 4B tax when I worked for the city from 1999 to 2009. It's a wonderful program, and I highly endorse it. Now, this is Brandon, is the Gulf Coast Water Authority dude talking. I want to tell you that Marie wasn't kidding about Trino Pedraza. He is an absolutely amazing employee. He actually has the position I used to have 20 years ago, and he works with us directly, does an amazing job, and so you're very, very lucky to have him. Tell you a little bit about the Gulf Coast Water Authority. We actually are the ones who provide the water to the city, who provides it to you. And I've kind of joked that water doesn't just fall out of the sky. Oh, wait, well, it does. But there's a huge process of how it gets to you. And by the way, this is a picture of one of our facilities. You've probably never really ever noticed it before. This is 146, as it's in North Texas City. Just before you get to the Dickinson Bayou Bridge, when you're driving down there, if you look off to the left, it looks like a giant levee, just a big old pile of dirt that's green. That's what it looks like from the top. And so when you're driving southbound coming across the Dickinson Bayou Bridge, if you look off to your right, you can catch a quick glimpse of it. That is a 9,000 acre-foot reservoir. Oh, gosh, acre-foot, what an obnoxious term. But that is actually jargon. That's typical in the water industry. An acre-foot is about 325,000 gallons. It's an acre a foot deep. But a 9,000 acre-foot reservoir, and how that makes a difference is that's a 30-day supply of water that comes out of that. It's sitting and ready to go. And the water treatment plant that I'll show you here in a minute is just about a mile downstream from there. Gulf Coast Water Authority was created in 1965. Our roots date back to 1940, which I'll show you here in a minute. We're a conservation and reclamation district. And for those of you lawyers who are keeping score, Chapter 49 and 54 of the Water Code, we are authorized to do water. We're authorized to do wastewater, but we don't. And by the way, it is only associated with a reuse component, and that is we can do wastewater, but we have to take the water that comes out of the plant and do something with it. Otherwise, we have a sister agency called the Gulf Coast Authority that we get confused with quite a lot. They primarily handle sewer. We serve Brazoria, Fort Bend, and Galveston County. We don't have something called a certificate of convenience and necessity, another really weird legal term. That means that nobody has to use us, and we don't have to serve anybody, unlike the city and so forth. They have a service area, and you have to use them, and they have to provide you, and so forth. And we are not authorized to tax, and we are very explicitly not authorized to do drainage. As a matter of fact, state law says I think we will burst into flames or something like that if we do anything that even remotely resembles drainage. It's actually pretty blunt. This is the Gulf Coast Water Authority Board, and they're all appointed by county judges in Fort Bend, Brazoria, and Galveston County. 5 of those guys represent Galveston County, and actually 3 of them directly represent the city and various cities. So I have 2. Your board president, Brad Matlock here. Brad is an at-large member, and he therefore represents the city. Dwayne Cole, off over here, he's a realtor in Texas City, and he is a city representative as well. And then very specifically, Jody Hooks of League City is one of your board members as well. I know you couldn't possibly read this. This is a big, long list of our customers. What it boils down to is that we serve a whole bunch of municipal customers, not just in Galveston County. To boil it down, we serve everybody in Galveston County except for Bolivar and Friendswood. Everybody else, we provide the water to. In addition, the city of Pearland in Brazoria County is one of them, and we serve all the way to Sugar Land. And I'll show you here in just a short bit. You may have seen all those constant level lakes in Sugar Land that all these houses are built around and that sort of thing. That's actually Gulf Coast Water Authority water that's flowing through there all the time. So we serve Sugar Land. We also serve a huge industrial facility. The entire Texas City industrial complex the entire Chocolate Bayou Industrial Complex. So if you see that glow across over there all the time, that's Chocolate Bayou Industrial Complex, and 16,000 acres of rice. So this is the Brazos River Basin, and this is remarkably important because I'm going to talk about everything circulating around the Brazos. And I hope you will understand how just important the Brazos River is to Galveston. It seems a little odd, but it is. So the Brazos River Basin, that's where we get our water from. And this, and I know unless you happen to get right on up here, it's difficult to see. This is our canal system, and you may have seen the canal system up on the mainland. See a little sign that says Gulf Coast Water Authority. As a matter of fact, there's a place where it crosses I-45 right around Buc-ee's. That is our canal system, and it's about 300 miles of canals. It's actually a very shocking thing to try to wrap your head around the maintenance that's associated with that. 300 miles worth of canals. And again, rice farmers, 16,000 acres of rice. And the reason this is important is because the way back roots, and I said we go back to 1940, we really go back to 1900. Because I believe that I am also the president of the Cane and Rice Belt something or another company. That happens to be an entity that the Gulf Coast Water Authority owns. And so we actually reach all the way back to about 1900 where all these rice canals were constructed. And that is the basis of how you get your water. So here's a picture of the Texas City Industrial Complex. As I mentioned, we serve all of them. We provide all of their water up to 90 million gallons a day. Try to wrap your head around that. That's a pile of water. They use typically about 60, but we can push 90 to them with a brand new pump station. The reason I put this is a couple of little a picture of a couple of old pipes, and it actually is from the Gulf Coast Water Authority, but I'm going to tell you a little story, and it doesn't directly deal with these pipes, but here's how the Gulf Coast Water Authority really got started. The industrial complex folks in Texas City started building an internal pipeline. And they started at two different ends and started building toward each other. And when they got to where they were going to do the connection, they weren't at the same elevation. And boy, the finger pointing went to happening. You stupid engineer, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You stupid surveyor, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. Pointing fingers every which way you could possibly think of. And it took a few years to realize that it was because of subsidence. And so once they figured that out, the Texas City Industrial Complex said, wow, we have got to do something about this. And oh, by the way, all this water we're pumping, we're starting to pump salt water now instead of fresh water as we're pumping into the industrial complex. And they formed an entity that was among all of them to get water. And they started looking at these rice canals and the like and started working toward getting those into place. So here's a picture of our old building. We've actually moved out of it and we're about to tear it down. If you've seen it on 1765, it's just west of 146. You may notice that over here on the right it says Galveston County Water Company. We used to actually be called the Galveston County Water Authority before we were the Gulf Coast Water Authority. And before that, we were the Galveston County Water Company. And before that, we were the Industrial Water Company. And that was the grouping of people that were put together of all of these industrial folks. We were a private company at that point. So here's just kind of a cute little picture. They put this up every once in a while when I go to talking at board meetings and the like. My staff think this is funny. This is a bunch of old men talking around an old pickup. I guess I'm starting to be the old man talking around the old pickup. So this is Galveston County Water Company. So here's a nice picture of I-45 back before it was really I-45. And we have a canal that crosses I-45. And as I mentioned, it's along the Buc-ee's area. And the way you can see it as you're driving along, they're building the new part of the freeway. There's actually a bridge that goes over nothing. It's kind of strange. It's like there's a bridge and then there's a big dirt path out there. Why would they build a bridge over that? Well, they actually built a bridge over the top of our canal that actually has concrete top on it. So if you look on either side, you'll see something that looks like a levee. That is actually the water conveyance that comes to Texas City that eventually gets to you all. And on the right is Galveston, because Galveston actually has an enormous part in the creation of the big Gulf Coast Water Authority, Galveston County at the time. And by the way, here is a picture of John's famous oyster resort. Why in the world would I put a picture of John's famous oyster resort up here, real close to about where number 13 is right now? The reason is because for the first several years of the Gulf Coast Water Authority, that's where the board meetings were held. Yeah, well, and I'm sure they were much more fun board meetings than I have now. But yes, initial meetings of the Gulf Coast Water Authority were held at John's famous oyster resort. Well, here's our facility now. We just moved into it a few months ago. If you've seen it on 1764, just west of 146 on the south side of the road. This is our new administration facility. We'd love for you to come by and visit with us if you ever happen to be in the area. And by the way, it's a little bit weird to get to. All sorts of looping. Well, if you come see us, you'll understand. And this is our sort of new facility in Alvin. This is our operations facility. We actually purchased this from an oil field services company, Frank's Casing Crew, is what it boils down to. They built the building, never moved in, sat vacant for 5 years. We essentially stole this building from Frank's. Well, they sold it to us at arm's length, but I feel like we stole it from them. Wonderful, wonderful facility on Highway 6, just inside the Brazoria County line on Highway 6 from Galveston County on the north side. Again, here's our canal system of how the water gets all the way from actually south of Katy and Fulshire is where we really pull the water out. And if you were to ever go to this pump station that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, you kind of have to pack a sack lunch and be real patient to get there from here. And here it is. That is the Shannon Pump Station, and that is the Brazos River there on the right. And the Shannon Pump Station, the intake is actually submerged in this picture, but the water is taken in on the right and runs through the white building and dumps into a canal and then starts making its long trek downward to us. This is another one of our pump stations. This one's actually the GLIF pump station. It's our southernmost pump station and primarily services rice canals and INEOS. And here is the Thomas Mackey Water Treatment Plant. This is where your water comes from. Thomas Mackey Water Treatment Plant, if you're heading up 146 and you've gotten past 1765 and you headed north, before you get to 1764, if you look over on the left, and I think there's a Center Point gas facility or something like that on the left, if you really look further back there, you'll start seeing tanks. Well, that's it. That's it. That's the Thomas Mackey Water Treatment Plant. Texas City built it, and they didn't run it but for about 9 months, and then they realized that it's a really, really difficult thing to do all of this, so they sold it to the Gulf Coast Water Authority, and it became the initial part of what the Thomas Mackey plant was. It's about 15 million gallons a day. We're at 58 million gallons a day now, and we've actually pushed as much as 65 out of it during Winter Storm Uri. So I want to talk to you about rates for a little bit because Galveston is one of our customers, and it matters. So 21 million gallons a day is what Galveston has a contract with us for. And we sell water, well, I'm going to tell you because I used to be the city manager of Pflugerville after I left Galveston, suburban Austin, and if you're not familiar with Pflugerville, it was like the third fastest growing city in the United States back when I was there. Huge, huge thing. Water's kind of a problem there and so forth. We actually sell finished water the cheapest I can find in the state, by far. When I was buying water in Pflugerville, I was buying it for $5 a thousand. We sell it for $1 a thousand at the fence. $1 a thousand. As a matter of fact, when I told the Texas Water Development Board Executive Director what I sold finished water for, he said, no, I didn't mean the raw water cost. I didn't mean the unfinished water. I meant finished. And it's like, yeah, it's $1 a thousand. Our raw water we sell untreated right out of the Brazos to those folks we sell it to for 30 cents a thousand. shockingly cheap. In addition, well, yes, lowest wholesale rate. So again, here is that picture that I showed you of the northernmost pump station, the Shannon pump station, just south of Katy. Ooh, and that's what it looked like in 2009. I actually still worked here at that point. Horrifying. Okay, you all saw it after Harvey, where it was 100 miles wide in places. It looked like that in 2009. And it can look like that again. And as a matter of fact, it's so narrow in a couple of spots, you could jump across the Brazos River. Jump across it all the way down here. This is a real issue that we've got to look for, because it happened in 2009, 2011, and 2013 here. And it will happen again, and I'm going to show you why here in a minute. And it's going to make a big difference. See, there's this thing called the Brazos Alluvium Aquifer. I bet you didn't think when you woke up this morning that you would be talking about the Brazos Alluvium Aquifer. But let me tell you what this boils down to. You see this orange area, think of that as the solid bottom of a bathtub. And this little bit right here is the river. And think of your bathtub full of pea gravel all up under it. This would be the pea gravel all up under it. And this little bit is where the water is flowing down the Brazos, where when it's really full, like I just showed you a little bit ago. This Brazos Alluvium Aquifer is in some cases 10 miles wide. And where it becomes a problem is because there's alluvium wells all off in it. And let me show you on this next slide. Yeah, that's the extent of the Brazos Alluvium Aquifer. It runs from Lake Whitney, north of Waco, all the way down to that pump station I showed you that is our southernmost around Julep and Rocheron. And in this slide, there's 2,100 wells off into that Brazos Alluvium. We've since recounted it, and it's closer to 3,000. Yeah, that's a picture of them. You can see them all around the Brazos River, all up and down. And let me tell you a little quick story about how Texas water works. It is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. I have visited, by the way, with Senator Middleton's staff in Austin about this. I want to visit with y'all again, because we need to prep for the next legislative session. Because I told y'all this about this once, and it takes a little bit to absorb all this. This is scary for us. Absolutely scary. So here's how Texas water works. Surface water, if it rains out of the sky and runs across the ground and flows and runs into the river, it's called run-of-the-river rights. And if it's under the ground, here, it's groundwater rights. Well, groundwater rights are a private property right. It's right of capture. It's kind of like oil. If it's below your property, you own it. If you can grab it, it's yours. If it runs across the land and runs into the river, it belongs to the state. And the state permits it, and we have permits, and by golly, do we have permits, and they're great permits, and the older the permits you have, the better, and we have like the oldest permits on the Brazos River. Our permits predate the Brazos River authorities. And when that water is running in the river, it's free for us. And we have permits of up to 400,000 acre feet of water. When you plug that in, and then times 325,000, plug that into your calculator and that sort of thing, it gives you this number that doesn't fit in gallons on your computer. It's an enormous amount of water. It's free. And that's one of the reasons that we are able to sell the water so cheap to you. But here's the thing. All these wells that are in here, well, again, that's a private property right, and they're able to just pull that out left and right without any restriction at all whatsoever. And so that in itself, once they pull down enough, it starts to actually pull the river down. And once it gets way down, that's when you start having what it looked like in 2009. That's a scary, scary thing. So again, here's what these wells look like. They're primarily used for irrigation. And probably the biggest issue that we have is in Brazos and Robertson County around Bryan College Station and so forth. There was thousands of them, hundreds of them in there, and they don't even have to permit how much water they take. So here's the thing, think about this for a second. If you're gonna put a pump out here in the river and pull water, you have to have a permit from the TCEQ that takes forever to get, and then you have to get in line on priority date. Again, ours is 1920 something or another, but if you drill a well right here and essentially pull the same water out, you just have to get a little permit from the Brazos groundwater district, and that water's yours. Right now, it's not a problem. Those of you who want to look at what I look at every day, if you'll pull down an app that shows stream flow in the Brazos River, and you go to Brazos and you go to the Hempstead gauge, as long as 700 cubic feet per second is running in the Brazos River, we're happy. It's okay. It's good. When it starts dipping down below 700 and starts heading to 500 and that sort of thing, that's when we start having a problem. A significant problem, actually. We aren't able to pull it out. And by the way, we have a backup to that. I'll show you here in a minute. Here's one of the reasons this scares me. Y'all have probably seen this picture of the Texas Triangle before: Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth. Yeah, here's what the Brazos Alluvium Aquifer looks like, that Texas Triangle put over the top of it. It's right in the middle of it. So I happen to be old enough that I used to work for the city of Dallas. And when I worked for the city of Dallas, there was a house that I went to go look at in Frisco. And this was in the mid-'80s. And my comment was, there's no way in hell I'm going to live up here. First of all, you can't get here. Second of all, there's nothing up here. Why would I live in Frisco, Texas? And oh, by the way, I looked at a house in the colony too. There's no way I'm going to live up here. All right, well, I guess you see what Frisco does now. All right, I worked for Pflugerville. I was the city manager of Pflugerville, as I mentioned earlier. Third fastest growing city in the United States, over 50,000 population. The current mayor, when he was born there, when he was a little kid, the population sign said 275 people. It now is over 100,000 people. So things grow. And this Texas Triangle is where everything is going to grow. And by the way, this is where the state then, Taylor, Texas, along about in here, new chip plant. They needed water really, really badly. I suspect that's not the last chip plant that's going to come in, and I suspect they're going to need water real bad up in there. And by the way, the BRA, Brazos River Authority, doesn't have any more water to sell. That's an interesting thing. Okay, the other thing is that the legislature, many years ago, probably almost as much as 10 years ago, took away the city's ability to unilaterally annex land, and everybody went, yay. Okay, well, there are unintended consequences associated with that, because I'm going to use Waco as an example. This is city limits of Waco. This is something called an extraterritorial jurisdiction, and the extraterritorial jurisdiction is a certain distance away from a city limit that you have control over because you're one day going to annex it. Now, Galveston doesn't really have that because they're kind of surrounded by things, and you can't have overlapping ETJs and stuff like that. Waco doesn't have that. Well, back before the Annexation Act changed, Waco would plan out in this area for surface water to extend out into those areas. Well, when they took away the unilateral annexation ability, what jumped up in place was municipal utility districts. Marty and I go way back on mud districts and the like. Municipal utility districts, and mud districts have their positive things, but mud districts really only have one thing that they start out doing. A developer looks for the cheapest reliable water they can possibly find. I don't blame them, I would too. Well, cheapest reliable water that you're going to be able to find now, because if you were in this ETJ, the city could force you to tie on to surface water. Now they can't. Now it's going to be the cheapest water that they can possibly find. Well, guess what? That Brazos alluvium is less than 100 feet deep, where the other well water that's associated with that is a couple of thousand feet deep. All right, well, they're going to jump into the middle of that. And this would take quite a bit more explanation, but this sort of thing is an issue, and again, unintended consequences. So here's how all of that works. There are all of these all of these planning regions in Texas when it comes to water, and I'm actually on one of these particular boards, and actually this is the wrong map, but they're very similar to it. This is the flooding map, but there is a water supply map as well. And what happens is that the planning for water goes on through this area. Well, we're going to end up in essentially a planning struggle between us and folks up in the Upper Brazos Basin. And so that comes to the legislature. And let me back up for a moment. I want to tell you a little bit about the BRA, and we'll show a little bit more about that here in a second. Remember I talked about running the river water, and it's free and so forth, and so we're in great shape. When that water goes down to where we can't pull water out after 500 cubic feet per second, we have contracts with the Brazos River Authority reservoirs. We're their second largest customer. And so when the water gets down to a certain level, we have to first of all guess if it's going to rain between here and the reservoirs. Because if it does and we do a release, it's just wasted. But otherwise, we actually call on the Brazos River Authority to open their dams up, and water starts flowing into the Brazos itself and brings that cubic feet per second number up, which means we can start pulling water out. And we're backed up to a level of 30% of annual flow, which is huge, by the way. So from a water standpoint, we're in great shape, no problem. The problem is that if that alluvium that I talked about a short bit ago has been pumped down real seriously and the river's starting to get real narrow, when they release that water, it soaks into the alluvium. I have to fill the alluvium back up before I can get water to flow to us. That's going to become a real serious problem. And when I put the legislature up here because right now the Texas legislature, especially on the Senate side, and those people that are in control of the Water and Agriculture Committee, have a firm belief, the leadership does, that there is no interface between groundwater and surface water. They will not admit that there is. And so we need to have a very serious education campaign that goes on associated with how that works. And so this legislative session, it's way gone, all in process and so forth. We're getting ourselves prepared where we are going to be informing everyone up there about how all of this works, because I'll tell you, if we start having a lot more development and it starts pulling that out, and that river starts to become not as reliable, and then I do releases and can't get the water here, that's when your water goes from $1 a thousand to a little bit more. And so let's talk about that a little bit more. By the way, here's another one of our reservoirs. Probably you've never seen this one too. It's out in the middle of nowhere. If you look at an aerial map of Alvin and you look south and a little bit east, you'll see an aerial photo of that. That's a 6,000 acre foot reservoir. We're looking at all sorts of different opportunities on how to use reservoirs. We bought that and it just turned out to be kind of a side deal. Well, that actually is a very, very useful component for us in the future. In addition, we're looking at various different wells. We're actually even talking to the city of Galveston about some opportunities that are associated with that for when it gets really, really a big problem. And I've heard this before, so why don't you just do desal? It's just right out there. It is an endless sea of water, and you betcha. I am probably, my water treatment plant where it's located right now is probably the best location on the Gulf Coast to put in a desal plant. And you know what? So my water bill, by the way, is about $100 a month. I'm rounding off kind of heavily, about $100 a month. And of that $100 a month, if you look at Galveston's budget, about 25 of it's water. And I'm heavily rounding, by the way. About 25 of it's your actual water bill, on your water bill. And of that 25, about 10 of it is us. Well, think about this for a moment. If I go from $1 a thousand to desal is $10 a thousand. And don't let them kid you when they say, oh, it's not been about $5. It's $5 unless you want the extras. It's kind of like buying a car. If you want the base model, has nothing on it, it's that much. But if you want it to actually work, it's $10 a thousand. So here my water bill, the $10 part of the city's water bill, for me to do desal would go to 100. So your bill would go from 100 to $190. Well, sure, I can build a desal plant, you bet. As a matter of fact, it'll be remarkably reliable, and it'll have all the water we could possibly want, and so forth. Y'all about ready to pay a $190 water bill because I built desal? So here's what we're doing. Getting everybody to understand this, I gotta tell you, if it comes to a fight over this Brazos alluvium, it's gonna be, they don't even care about Galveston, it's gonna be Nino industrial folks, Marathon, Dow, and that sort of thing, who are customers of ours, against the farmers. We're gonna lose, straight up lose, is what it boils down to. So we gotta be very pragmatic about this, and that is, okay, here's the problem that we've identified. Let's all work together on this. And one way of working together on this is, y'all keep saying you wanna have desal plants on the Texas Gulf Coast. Have I got a deal for you? But by the way, I want you, state and federal government, because we need to bring the feds in on it too, because they can help. And by the way, Congressman Weber, I have no doubt, will be able to help us to some extent on this as well. We can get state and feds to pay the capital cost of the desal plant. That's going to take that $10 a thousand and squeeze it way, 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 way down. Operations costs are still high on that, but that's going to really, really make it a whole lot more palatable for us to be able to do that. So anytime anybody says, well, you can do desal, well, you can say, well, it's going to cost so much, we're not going to want to pay for it. So thank you for the opportunity to visit with you all about this. I know this was a shockingly, one more thing, and it's important. That's a drought map of Texas, and it's the most recent drought map of Texas. And one of the things that I was talking to everybody about before, it's like, well, why do we have a problem? It rained here the other day. My lawn's green. It's not a drought down here. It's not down here that counts. Where it counts is in the Brazos River Basin. Brazos River Basin from roughly north of I-10 up to Possum Kingdom Reservoir, if you don't know where that is, around I-20 or a little bit north. If it rains in the Brazos Basin and it's north of I-10 and south of I-20, we all win. Because that's running the river water, and that water is free for us to pick up. But if it hasn't rained there and it looks like this, that starts to become a problem. And here's where the real thing is, at least for now. You can find this, by the way, on the Brazos River Authority website. This is the percent full that the reservoirs are. And this time last year, they were about 96% full. Really, pragmatically, 100% full. And by the way, by the middle of the winter, they were 70% full. And you know who drained them? Us. We drained them down from 100% full to 70. And that was the water that you drank all during the summer and fall. Well, now they have rebounded to about 75% full. So you've seen all that rain that's gone on up there and that sort of thing. Well, it's gone from 70% to about 75%. We have another summer like we did last summer. You can count on us pulling 30% down again in those reservoirs. And so it's going to go from 75 to whatever that is, 45. When it starts to get to 45%, that's when everybody starts to have some serious problems. It can rain here all day long during that period. If I've only got 45% left in those reservoirs and I come up to another summer, that's when it starts to get really, really big problems. So we're doing massive planning on how to deal with that stopgap in case we get ourselves into that place. So next time that you're thinking about water supply and rain and that sort of thing, and I know when I worked in Austin, they would say, well, if it rains west of Austin, we're in great shape. Well, here, if it rains in the Brazos River Basin, north of I-10, south of I-20, we're in good shape. We want it, that's yay, we want it to rain there. If it doesn't, that's when you need to start thinking about it. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, bearing in mind that I'm ever so slight bit deaf, and so if you ask me a question, you're gonna have to probably speak up a bit for me to actually hear you.
Thank you, Fran. Quick question on desal. Is there any economies of scale, or is it?
Absolutely, and it gets you to $10 a thousand. Otherwise, it's shockingly expensive. So the economies of scale is they will, I can't even get a desal company to talk to me unless it's in 25 million gallons trains. And I'm also glad you brought that up. Remember I said we're about a 58 million gallon a day plant? 25 million gallon a day trains. Well, just build a couple trains of it and you'll be fine, and so forth. And oh, by the way, there's a 50 million gallon a day example north of San Diego in Carlsbad, California, which I've been to the plant, and it works really, really good, and that's great. Okay, here's the thing about desal plants. They go down, and they go down hard. Because when they're pulling out of the water, if there's anything yucky out there, they can't pull in at all. So the difference between that plant and our plant is that it is 50 million gallons a day, and it's supplying a 500 million gallon a day demand. So it's only 10%. But if I put one in, it would be 100% of our demand. And if I have one go down, and think about this for a second. If I have a fire in the ship channel up there, and they put all sorts of foam out there, and that foam kind of creeps down I've got to shut the plant down. Then what do I do? Those are the types of things that we have to think about when it comes to desal.
Good. Awesome. Thank you.
The scenario you just described sounds like you'd be shifting from what you're doing now to desal. What about desal as a supplement to what you're doing?
Perfect. So here's, because I only had so much time to talk about this, what we're really looking at, remember that 9,000 acre foot reservoir that happens to be, that's Dickinson Bayou, and that's Galveston Bay. So the thing is that we can actually blend seawater and Brazos River water that's coming in, and when we blend, it becomes a brackish desal plant, and it's a whole different ball game. So if it's a brackish plant, they're much cheaper under those circumstances. So let me tell you how carried away we have gotten. We have done calculations that we can pump 3 million gallons a day of seawater into that reservoir, and you'd never notice. Never notice. You just blend it in, becomes part of the overall, because all water has salt in it, just it's the level of salt that's the problem. So yes, we have looked at the prospect of, and our partners at the Brazos River Authority and the Subsidence District, we're going to be partnering to do that next phase of study that will help us understand that better.
And just follow up quick. In a brackish plant, have you had conversations with Congressman Weber about federal sources of funding on that?
We're just getting started.
Just getting.
Brandon, can you repeat the question for the folks back here?
Oh, have I talked to Congressman Weber about this? We're just getting started. And by the way, Congressman Weber is aware of our overall circumstances, but I have a confession to make, and that is that the Gulf Coast Water Authority did absolutely zero advanced planning prior to about 2018. We reacted to everything that we did, and because I came up through cities, I've worked in this business for 38 years, 33 of them have been for cities, primarily in the planning and that sort of thing. I brought municipal planning to the Gulf Coast Water Authority, and we are doing massive comprehensive planning. But before we can talk reasonably about it, we kind of have to bring data. And so we're just now getting started, and that's the thing is we're preparing, when it comes to the state at least, we're preparing for the 2025 session coming up. Yes, sir.
Earlier you alluded to $1 per thousand or $10 per thousand. What's the thousand?
Gallons.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
How much of Galveston's water comes across that blue pipe on the railroad bridge?
All of it.
All of it. What's Plan B?
We're working on a second pipe as we speak.
No, they actually have a great plan
It's
B.
under construction. The second pipe is under construction.
And there actually is a second pipe already, but it's actually under that pipe in the bridge, and that pipe was built in 1917. And so and by the way, the 1917 pipe, when I first came to work here, the 1917 pipe was the new one. There was an 1890 pipe that went under, that was the old one. So the 1917 pipe is the backup, but I've been around the folks in Galveston who've been working on all of this. They have done wonderful things about getting that second pipeline in place, and if I understood correctly, y'all got a grant.
Yeah.
I was just
We
going to
did get a
comment.
grant.
You got a grant for that.
And it's not a grant.
Ah.
What it is Congressman Weber worked with us last year Congress appropriations was accepting what they call community project funding requests. It's the new label for earmarks. And Congressman Weber was able to get funding for us to put towards this specific pipe water supply issue. So that's the Causeway pipeline is exactly what was one of our requests, and he was able to get us, I think, $10 million to put towards that.
And by the way, as you're driving out of Galveston on I-45, all that black pipe that's off on the left side, that's going to be the new pipe going in. And so it's replacing a 1960 and about a 1999 pipeline that's off over there because of the widening of the roadway. And so that is actually the water pipe that is going to be utilized when you're coming in. And Galveston's take point is actually on Virginia Point. It's on the mainland side, kind of behind Bubba's Bar. And so that's where we end, and then Galveston begins from there on. Yes, sir.
What is the quality of the water that you deliver to Galveston versus what we end up drinking?
What is the quality that I deliver versus what Galveston delivers? I would say that it is equal or possibly even better. And let me tell you that Galveston's system is set up because of the way it used to be set up that would take me 30 minutes to describe. But Galveston's system is set up to where when we deliver it strictly in accordance with TCEQ standards. But Galveston then has the ability to take it into tanks and then repump it and re-disinfect it and push it out. So the way it used to be when I was here, when you couldn't even turn on the valve in Palm Beach and actually get water to come out in the summertime, and now is shockingly different. So what Galveston has done, I mentioned to you earlier, when I was here, all I did was keep the patient alive because that's all we could do. Well, and by the way, we lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 55% of the water that we had coming onto the island. The steps that Galveston has taken between when I left and now is huge. When I used to work here, we would utilize somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 26 million gallons a day of our 21 million gallon a day allocation. We were using Leak City's water is kind of what it boils down to. Galveston's now down to a typical day is about 13 million gallons a day. It's like, wow, how did they do that? You've been growing like a weed. Well, you're not leaking it all over everywhere, which is what I was doing. And the reason I wasn't able to fix the leaks is because, again, I was keeping the patient alive. You got to make sure the pump station runs. You got to focus on that, or you're out of business. What else can I answer for you today? Thank you for an opportunity to come. We used to be kind of a stealthy organization, didn't want anybody to know anything about us. Now I want to tell you everything, and we'd like to have a lecture that would last all afternoon and then train you a little bit more and so forth. And I know you don't want to do that, but anything more that you would like to visit about, I'd be happy to. And thank you again, Jerry, for the opportunity to come visit.
So great to have you back, Brandon. Thank you.
So great to have you back. Thank you again. Well, that'll be it for our meeting. I'm asking the board to stay here for a little bit. Yes, Marty?
Just a quick shout out to you. I don't know if you know that Jerry is changing gavels at the American Shore and Beach Texas chapter. He has resigned. And what has happened over the period of time that he brought the connection between Texas to the Washington and American beach shores is so significant. And if you're talking about anything that's happening on the beach, the state organization that he started has done all this work, and the professionals, the government, the dredgers, everybody in the world comes to it. So
Thank you. There are a lot of people involved. But thank you. Our next meeting is May 20th here at the Country Club, and we're going to have Roger Reese, he's the Galveston Wharves Board Director and the CEO, and he'll just give us an update on what's happening with the Port of Galveston. A lot of exciting things going on down there. But anyways, happy tax day next week. I think it's the 18th. Get your taxes done. Beverly, thank you again for coming here from Maysville. So nice meeting you. Thank you all. Taz, thank you again. Okay.